Welcome to the Never a Phase podcast. In just a minute, we're going to have Rob, the drummer from Good Night Moon, a great conversation, a band that came back after almost 20 years and re-recorded their original EP. They are getting the second bite of the apple in the scene, and we are so excited for them. But before we get into that interview, let's get some of the paperwork out of the way. This show is a part of the Never a Phase network. We are a collective of creators dedicated to keeping the spirit of the scene alive. Our network of creators makes social media content. We share music news and reviews and bring you great podcasts like Emo Kids Anonymous, the Imperfect Dads podcast, and the Ska Mailman podcast, along with this, the Never a Phase podcast. If you want to follow what we're doing, check out neveraphasenetwork.com. Yes, we have a website. We're very professional journalists now. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We are Never a Phase Network wherever you are watching videos. Me, I'm Swemo, and you can find me at Ryan Strikes Back on TikTok or Emo Education on Instagram or The Emo Education on YouTube because I'm bad at social media optimization. Just Google Swemo. I'll come up eventually. Today's show is brought to you by Eargasm Earplugs. Eargasm produce high-fidelity earplugs which reduce noise up to 21 decibels while maintaining audio clarity, so you can still hear everything around you. Perfect for concerts, festivals, or any other loud environment where you want to protect your ears without missing a thing. Get yours today at eargasm.com and use code EMO10 to save 10%. Let's start the show. My guest tonight represents a Florida band that made waves in the scene 20 years ago, earning them spaces on stage with bands like Bayside and Hello Goodbye, also festival shows with Taking Back Sunday, My Chemical Romance, some of the heavy hitters of the scene. Sadly, like so many of our bands, they had to take a hiatus back in 2010, left the scene for a while, but they are back in 2026 because it was never a phase. So they have a new self-titled EP that's actually a re-recording of their songs from almost 20 years ago, ready to find a new audience. The song Her Achilles Heel actually landed them a spot on Hot Topic's new release playlist on Spotify. You can go listen to it right now. They're gearing up for their reunion show April 17th in Palm Beach. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the scene, Rob from Good Night Moon. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us. Appreciate it.
You get to be the representative for the whole band here and tell the whole story. And we were talking off air, and I think I want to start with this. You guys have grown up and had adult lives and things like that. So you guys started in like Palm Beach, Orlando, but now you're in LA. So let's go all the way back. What was the original birth of the band? What was that first run like as you guys are now kind of gearing up and coming back into the scene?
Yeah, no, I mean, we were founded like many bands were as a group of high school kids that knew each other from school. And growing up, I had a little recording studio in a bedroom in my folks' house. And I used to record all the local bands in the Florida scene that were coming through in my studio. And the guys in Good Night Moon were in a band called Lost Remainder before we started Good Night Moon. And so I recorded their first ever recording of that band, and then they asked me to come and play drums, and we worked on our debut EP 20 years ago and played all those shows and that. So we were founded in my folks' extra bedroom in my little recording studio, all friends from growing up together in the South Florida scene. And again, the scene during that era was just so energetic. It was so open. You had, kids in high school opening up for huge bands like, again, Paramore and The Sleeping and all sorts of really amazing shows that came through West Palm Beach. And so, that's where we started in this bedroom and played a bunch of really fun shows back in the day. And we're back here 20 years later.
So you guys, that was like West. First of all, I got to ask you about the geography because I actually got family in that area and I've never understood. West Palm Beach is north, right? And there is still a North Beach.
There's North Palm Beach, there's West Palm Beach, there's Palm Beach Gardens. So there's a lot of Palm Beaches all in that area. So we were technically in a suburb of the city of West Palm Beach called Palm Beach Gardens. But West Palm Beach was kind of the heart of the music scene in our area. And if you go further south, you've got Fort Lauderdale. We played a bunch of shows there. You have Miami, that was kind of its own scene at the time. And then you go, up north into, 3 hours north is Orlando, which had its own scene, and Tampa, where Under Oath and Amberlin and those folks are from, and Lakeland, where Copeland's from. So this whole kind of peninsula was filled with pretty awesome bands during that era.
What was it like growing up like a little punker or whatever? In my mind, you become a golfer. That's what you are in West Palm Beach. There's retirement villages. Obviously, there's a whole other side to this.
We're so lucky that the neighbors never called the cops on us playing in the suburbs, but we lucked out there. You're right. It's this weird juxtaposition of old folks and then clearly some young folks. Downtown West Palm Beach has a really fun street called Clematis, and it's where there's a lot of bars and nightclubs. And there was this little dive bar called Ray's Downtown Blues, and this guy named Alex Checkman, who founded Smart Punk Records amongst other companies, at the time was young. He's been a serial entrepreneur ever since, and he booked some amazing bands coming through kind of in the breakthrough of that scene at this little bar called Ray's. And again, all the bands that we talked about have played this little dive bar that sadly no longer exists. But the scene
Best
exists
ones
through
don't,
another.
I feel like, yeah.
I know, yeah. Ray's there's a great podcast. I'll have to find it where Ray actually is interviewed and talks about the scene during that time. And but there's a great venue across the street from it that we played 10 years ago for a reunion show called Respectable Street. And there's this thriving scene during that era that had amazing bands, again, Dashboards from our relative area, Newfound Glory going back even further back. And if you talk to bands today, chatted with Chris, the drummer of Bayside, at a show maybe a year ago, and I was like, "You remember Ray's Downtown Blues, that smoky little dive bar?" And he's like, "Hell yeah!" Like it was wild, but we played back then. So there was this cool little scene that we all played in, and it was a great time.
You're exposing me to like a whole different side of West Palm Beach. For me, it's like I said, it's retirement villages, golfing, and Rico's Pizza. That's what I take away from my time in West Palm Beach.
Yeah.
But it's good to know. It's good to know that behind that curtain there's a thriving scene. And you're name dropping. We're gonna have to spend some time on that. You're name dropping just so many
Sorry.
great bands. And no, I'm just saying. We've talked about it. I'm from Ohio, and I feel still pretty disconnected. And when I was like coming up and playing shows, like we almost had to leave our geographical area for like 2 hours. That's where like the big shows that we played ended up being. We had a nice little niche of our own and shows, but if you wanted to really make waves, you had to get out of Toledo. And so I would kind of not expect West Palm Beach to have that kind of scene, but it sounds like you guys really cultivated something. And that kind of does take us to the EP and what you guys are now releasing, because this EP, self-titled, it's all songs from back then. Like you had actually fully recorded this EP once in the past, correct?
Yeah, we did, and it it was up on iTunes back when you could pay 99 cents for a song on iTunes, and over the years it kind of fell off, and rather than just kind of reposting the EP from back then, we said, hey, like, let's try to redo these and refresh them and bring in some modern production and see what we would do to kind of enhance them a little bit. And so about a year ago, on a flight, ironically, from Orlando back to where I am in LA, I pulled up our old EP on my music on my iPhone, and I brought out this notepad and a pen and paper, and I said, all right, let me think through all these songs, and like, let's look at the tempos, let's look at the arrangements, what would we cut out, what would we change, what would we turn around. And so kind of I kicked off that process with a good friend of mine who we grew up in that scene together, named Matt Marino. He lives out here in LA now, and excuse some more name dropping, but I'm going to rep some of the cool stuff that Matt works on. But he's, he writes songs with Machine Gun Kelly and with Mod Sun. He worked on some stuff for Papa Roach. He's just a real deal, amazing songwriter, music producer out here in LA. And he and I collaborated on bringing these songs back to life. And I sent the initial demos that we worked on back to JB, our singer in Orlando. And he was like, this is really fun. Like, let's do this. And so that whole process kicked off about a year ago, and here we are a year later. I'm excited to put it out and excited to share it with fans and folks who haven't heard of us.
Yeah, and so you said, because once again, the initial hiatus breakup was 2010. It sounds like you guys played like a reunion show at some point in the middle, but was there already inklings of working together again, getting back together again, or was it just kind of like, you starting to work on the music and saying like it's time and seeing if you could get all the players back? Did you get all the players back? I guess is also a question.
Yeah, it's a great one. So we've got band members all over the place, and I was looking at like a Wikipedia page for Emory the other day, and they've got this like really intricate chart of like the overlapping band members over the year. There's like, hey, we had this guy from this area, this shop. So we're a similar story in that we've had some pockets of various band members. Andy Placencia, who is our founding member of the band and bass player, helped write most of the music. He lives in Berlin now, and he's DJing iconic clubs in Berlin, playing like hard style techno and really cool stuff. So we I hit him up as we were working through these songs again and got his opinion on things, but he's like, hey man, I don't think I can fly in from Berlin for the show. So unfortunately he's out. And then we've got another band member who lives in Boston now, who's about to have his first baby right when these shows are kicking off. So we've got some of the original crew coming back together for these shows, but we've got other band members that are all around, and that's kind of the story of if you want to call it the hiatus or disbanding. We all ended up moving to different parts of the country, and folks went to colleges and different places and different things, and went about our normal lives. But it's been fun to get back together. In the last 10-year reunion show, we got the full lineup of everyone who's ever been in the band came back and played that show at Respectable Street on Clematis and West Palm, which was so fun. And we'll try to do the best on these shows coming up to get a good chunk of that original crew back together.
I mean, was that recording process like trippy? I'm sure you've learned a lot in whatever 20 years. Did you find it difficult to recreate it? Did you find you wanted to take some songs some new directions, or was it like a labor of love to recapture where you guys were 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And the other thing that comes up here is like a debate amongst like music fans of, you know, I'm a weird believer that like bands' first few records are some of their best pieces of work, and it's really difficult for a band or an artist to make really great music later on in their career. I don't know what there is about it. Musicologists can debate it, musicians can debate whatever it is, but like there's this thing about writing songs in your teenage years that's just got something to it, or again, even the early pieces. So we wanted to capture some of that like emotion and creativity that we had during that era. But again, bring in some of the wisdom that you learned through listening to music for 20 years and, working on various records here and there from a production standpoint. And so it was an interesting mix. JB Corey, our lead singer, changed a few, left the vocals largely the same, but brought in like he'll have a few screams and a few like lines that are just newer and a little bit more refreshed. That kind of speak to kind of where we are in life and middle age a bit more than we did when we were, teenagers writing songs about maybe a bad breakup or the stress, what we felt like was stress during that part of our lives.
Hmm.
And so he's kind of woven in a little bit. We didn't change much materially, but it was really fun. It was really energetic, and the production tools that are available to folks today. Again, the ability for us to send files back and forth over the internet. All of the amazing like equalizers and guitar amps and digital guitar amps and things that you have today that we just didn't have 20 years ago, where we have a giant Marshall guitar stack and crank it up as loud as you could and stick a microphone in front of it. There's just so much more sophistication that we have today that makes the process a lot faster and a lot more streamlined. And so it was really fun to kind of do that, and again just work across the country to kind of get this project out.
Do you remember your original influences? Obviously, you're not mimicking bands, but you had different influences probably, 15, 20 years ago than you do now. So I listened to it because I was hearing like, oh, that reminds me kind of a Matchbook Romance. That reminds me of early Ataris even. Do you feel like you were able to like recapture like what those much younger versions of yourself were influenced in trying to create?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that you'll hear that this, and again, the old recordings aren't out, and maybe we'll think about whether we want to put out some of the originals again, and folks can compare and contrast. But
Bonus
this is,
tracks, yeah.
yeah, bonus tracks. This is definitely like heavier, and I think that you found that like our sound has evolved over, and maybe our taste has evolved over time to get like a bit heavier than it was maybe during that era. And I think the genres itself, if you really follow like musically what's happened, it's kind of gotten heavier. Like drop D was kind of the standard of the scene at the time. And this record is, the guitars are in drop D, but drop C is like standard these days in heavy music. And then you find all sorts of really cool metalcore bands and stuff that are going, lower and lower than that, right? So that just production style sonically, like where the things are going. But hopefully, like, picking a bit of the heaviness from bands. Again, well, I'll tout, Florida bands that we were influenced by around the era of, I hope there's a little bit of Under Oath in there. I hope there's like, some catchy stuff like you heard from Amberlin. Again, Aaron Marsh from the band Copeland, one of my absolute favorite musicians on the planet, and we've been able to connect over the years, and he's become a friend, and he was gracious enough to mix this record for us. And so you get his kind of splash of wisdom and living through this scene all of those years, and producing some amazing records with Amberlin, with the guys in the Starting Line, with some really amazing records over the years. So we've got his kind of pinch of sound in what we put out here too. So hopefully it's kind of tapping into some of those sorts of things.
Yeah, it definitely, I think that did strike me, and especially knowing it was 20 years old, how not in the box it was. Like, I expected a certain level of like, oh, I know it was popular 20 years ago. Like, we're going to be right in this wheelhouse. Because just the bands you mentioned, Under Oath and Amberlin, they share some DNA, but you wouldn't say they sound alike, and so I was just really impressed with how, once again, knowing the age of it, I think it ages well, and I can see why you guys would want to revisit that, because in a lot of ways, you almost feel you were ahead of the curve on some of those things with the way it sounds now. You mentioned, about early albums and young men and things like that, and like I was said, you're revisiting the stuff you wrote then. I do think there is something to be said for when you're younger and hungrier and just a little grittier. I actually did an interview the other day with some guy. We were all old fat dads at this point, and we were just talking about, I struggled as a songwriter the more my life settled down, because I basically I got fat and happy, and then I was like, oh, I don't have anything that really bring out that edge anymore. What is it trying to recapture some of that youth that made you guys want to go back to that? Did you ever entertain the idea of like, I want to write some new songs with these guys or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think stay tuned. So this is where we started. We've actually been cooking up some other stuff that will hopefully be coming kind of right on the heels of this, as some singles and some covers and some other things that we're excited about. So stay tuned. There might be a 2.0. This has kind of been the starting point for us, is let's recreate this and see where this takes us. And I think we've been energized by that piece of it. Yeah, I mean, there's, again, like, I think speaking on behalf of JB, our singer who writes all the lyrics and that sort of thing, I think he really tried to. There's a few lines again that he would change up and from what we had in the past to kind of keep things a little bit more relevant. But he talks a lot about how he was kind of impressed with himself as a 16, 17, 18-year-old writing some of these lyrics at the time, and that they're kind of timeless kind of themes and things that we all kind of deal with, and the metaphors kind of carry through to today. So, and I think he channeled that when he was singing the songs, of trying to channel whatever he was feeling and the stresses of adult life are different from the stresses of younger life, but it's nonetheless, we're all dealing with the same stuff. And I think a lot of the reason that we turn to the music that we love during that era is because it helps us through the stuff that we've all got to deal with at this stage in our lives. So but I will say, the tempos that we talk about, like, you'll find bands as they age, you take maybe you detune the song a little bit
step, yeah.
or you slow the tempo down a few BPMs. When I was tracking drums on this, I was like, man, this is some cardio. And we were lucky enough to have a few of my drummer friends do covers for us that they posted online, and they commented kind of similar stuff. They're like, "Oh man, I forgot. Like, this is a workout to play songs at this tempo." So, kudos to all of the bands. I saw, again, I just said Under Oath too much, but we didn't go on the cruise. I mean, I was seeing they played 47 tunes, like at that tempo with that energy. like they are, in shape to be able to play, that sort of stuff. So kudos to all the bands that are playing a lot of dates right now at, in their 30s and 40s, because it's not physically easy.
No,
So kudos to
no.
them.
No, on the indie cruise, we had a representative from our group, Kane, and she was there and sending videos and like state champs. I think state champs played their own shows and then played karaoke so other people could sing their songs and yeah, just I'm like, man, they must go home tired. You said JB being impressed with his lyrics and things because a song like specifically music is my medicine. I think is almost more relevant today. I mean, when you think about the changing conversations about mental health and music's connection to mental health and things like that. Certainly, I remember, 2005, even though we were these emo bands, like there was still a stigma in being like, well, no, I write this music and I get it out. I don't have to like do anything else. Like I don't, we, we, we were healing, but we kind of weren't. And so listening to music is my medicine, I think. Um, does show some maturity. Like I said, maybe you guys were ahead of the time on where some of these things were going to acknowledge the role of music in that healing process and becoming kind of therapy stuff.
No, I mean, my wife is a mental health therapist, and
Oh, okay.
we give a lot of our charitable donations, and a lot of our time and energy goes into supporting mental health causes, and that's kind of an area that we're really focused on, just helping communities. And it's so great that this community that you're curating, and that we're all kind of building online together to harken back to the songs that we liked. I mean, emo, it's in the name of the genre that we've kind of come to now embrace. It's funny how we didn't embrace it 20 years ago. But yeah, it's super important to us. And I think that's part of our message as a band, is the importance of mental health, especially like in this stage of life that a lot of us are in. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's there, and music plays a heavy role.
So you mentioned some other folks in the production and things like that, and then obviously the band, and you're across the whole country. What did the recording look like? You've already sort of touched on that you're sending files back and forth, but like, who was anyone in person? Was anyone able to collab together? Is this a testimony to where we're at with the internet? That your producers in one area, your drummers in the other area, singers in the other area. What did that all look like coming together for these songs?
Yeah, this was true 2025, 2026 now record production, 99% virtual. So it's pretty
Wow.
wild. So Matt Marino and I, who worked on a lot of the instrumentals here in LA, were in person for a chunk of the sessions. He and I were either in this room, which serves as kind of my little home studio, and or at his studio, another side of LA in Burbank, and worked on a lot of that stuff together. Mike DiPietro, one of the guitar players in the band, was in Boston and tracked a lot of guitars in Boston, and sent those over the internet to us. And then JB worked with a producer out of Orlando, and tracked a lot of the songs in there with Ian, the producer that he worked with in Orlando. And so it was a true testament to the digital age of the internet, using Google Drive and Dropbox to shuffle files back and forth to each other. Again, Ben Gibber did it before it was cool, and so we're following that trend. So yeah, it was all online. We all used Apple Logic. For any music nerds who are production folks, like the whole thing was in Logic, and we just shipped Logic files across the country to each other.
And just because you mentioned it, I want to reiterate it. Aaron from Copeland, Aaron Marsh, what role was he having in this?
Yeah, he mixed the record. So we tracked everything. And again, back to digital files. I hit him up. I worked for a company called Apogee that makes audio interfaces, that makes all of this tech possible. And we use their tech to record a lot of things on the record. And Aaron and I met at Apogee here in LA over a decade ago, and connected, and have talked about production and things. And I asked him if he wanted to be a part of this, and he was like, "Yeah, I love the sound, and like, let's go." So we sent him essentially like the raw recording files, and I gave him a few like rough mixes that I had made, and I said like, take your creativity. And normally like mixing is just kind of getting everything to gel, getting everything to sound right, but Aaron is so talented as a, lyricist, songwriter, composer. He does orchestral, compositions.
Oh
He's
yeah.
just an absolute mastermind. Yeah. And so we were really excited about like his role. So normally you'd be pushing fader. So the guitar's louder, the snare drum louder, the vocal have this delay on it. But Aaron really took this like level of creativity that he does with, I mean, every piece of music that he's put out, and just really took them in a direction that was really cool and made them sound kind of darker and more, again, back to production techniques. Like I heard some vocal effects that kind of reminded me of like what Will Yip did with Turnstile. And like there's just
Okay,
like
there you
all
go.
of these things that he kind of brought into the element of the mixing process that really took the whole project to another level. And then he picked a friend of his, Jonathan Berlin, a mastering engineer who's another Florida guy. Everybody who worked on the record was from Florida, and that was important to us. So Aaron kind of was top of mind for me as somebody that I wanted to be part of the project as part of that Florida scene. And so Berlin, the mastering engineer, was from the Jacksonville scene. And he lives here in LA now, and so he and I went to his studio while he was, mastering it, putting the kind of final touches on it to kind of take Aaron's mixes to the final bit. So yeah, it was really fun. Everyone who worked on it had some role in that original Florida scene that we grew up in. Although the record wasn't all done, in my bedroom like it was 20 years ago in West Palm. We all had some sort of connection to it.
I've heard now the passion as you speak about the Florida scene, and certainly anyone who grew up in our scene, emo and pop punk. Like I could rattle off. You named a few that I had actually forgotten were from Florida already, with like Amberlin, Copeland, but. A Day to Remember, Newfound Glory, Dashboard. I think if you go into Tampa, you get like From First to Last, and Under Oath, certainly. And I'm sure you know the list way better than I could ever come up with, because I'm going to leave a ton out. But there's something in the water. There's something going on where all these bands that sort of were peaking during our era were coming out of Florida. So as you guys were playing back then, certainly that's like heavy competition, but that's also heavy opportunity. And now that's still with you today, that you're trying to incorporate Florida into this recording. Tell me about your love affair with the Florida scene, man. You're very dedicated to this. So, what was it like, and what are you trying to cultivate today by still bringing hometown people together?
Yeah. And it's interesting is that we never felt it as a bit of a competition. I know that the word battle of the bands is always a thing, right? And like, I mean, even Warped Tour had the, Ernie Ball battle of the bands, right? To get bands that would, be able to play on that stage in Warped Tour. It was so cool because it was so inclusive at the time. And, JB talks about how you'd have a ska band and you'd have a punk band and you'd have a post-hardcore band and you'd have a, acoustic band all playing on the same set at the same night. And if you look at, some of the bills on our Instagram page, we post a bunch of our old show posters that are just so fun to look at. And you look at the diversity of acts, and you'd have a deep list of bands, 4, 5, 6 bands on a bill and a night, ranging from, acoustic stuff. And the cool thing about it is how connected and how everyone stayed for all the shows, right? Everybody was like loving everything, and we were all super supportive of each other. And so it was just a really cool place to grow up in, and like specifically to the West Palm area that we grew up in during that era. I played in a band that also doesn't have any music on the internet anymore, called The Latency, with a guy named Jerry Pierce. Jerry went on to play in a band called Versa Emerge that was signed to Fueled by Ramen. So if you know them, they're from just up the road from us in Port St. Lucie. And so they're a band that kind of broke through our local scene and did some really awesome stuff. Another group that came from our hometowns, Hey Monday, and they were all from the West Palm Beach scene. So there were two bands. Easton was one band, and Anniston was another band. We used to play tons of gigs with them, and members of Easton and Anniston came together with Cassidy to make Hey Monday. And so that was kind of like the era that we kind of were playing in those types of band in that time. But again, you'd have a band like us. It's a bit heavier, kind of, drop D post-hardcore type of situation. And then the band Easton that was very poppy, very kind of Rocket Summer-esque.
Mm.
you know, all playing on the same bill and doing the same thing. So it was just a fun time and a fun scene. And I hope that, and I'm so encouraged to see, you know, at least the music that's charting right now, what Gen Z is starting to get into, that rock music is back. We talked about there's like a dead decade, right? It was like, I don't know, 2020 or 2013 through maybe 2022, 2023, where, you know, love electronic music, love hip hop, love stuff in there, but sometimes I just want a distorted guitar and a real drum set. And it's exciting that that's coming back and the next generation's getting into it. And so I also think that the geography of Florida like helps. You kind of have garages, you have places where people can, you know, play. And, you know, you were mentioning golfers and people, you know, a lot of folks when we were growing up, yeah, would go out fishing, would go out on boats, but we were the nerds that would stay inside from the heat and just, you know, rock out in, you know, in our parents' house, instead of going out to the beach or the golf course. So, you know, I hope that this, what's happening in music now, the work that we're doing is inspiring kind of the next generation to do the same thing, because it created this great community. It was a great thing to do when you know, are in that, you know, coming of age time, right? In your teens and into your 20s. It's just like a fun type of social interaction to be a part of, just to be a part of a music scene like that. And again, we were lucky to be a part of a fun one, and hope that it's coming back around and the next generation gets to, you know, create their own music and do the same thing.
It's funny that you mentioned like Cassidy, because I do like you talk about that lost decade or whatever. I feel like Cassidy might be like one of the poster children for that. Of like, 'cause I know from my journey, even to be now the guy that talks to people about music. But you know, I was a musician. It didn't work out. I got to that age where it was like, okay, man, time to get a haircut and a real job, and just thought, we call it never a phase for a reason. Just thought like, okay, well, that's over and we're done now, and it just never settled. Like it never felt good. It never felt right. And so, um, post COVID, maybe just a little pre COVID, you had people, but you had MGK flirting with it as nostalgia stuff, and all of a sudden there was this period where I like kind of looked, and for someone who loved music so much, I was like, I can't think of the last new band that I really loved. I can't think of the last band that really got me going, and like, is it just done? And then, like you said, for me, it was very much post COVID, 21, 22. All of a sudden, there's just all these bands where I was like, wait, no, like that's it. That's what it was. And then obviously, the old bands come back too. And it's just a really beautiful thing. So Cassidy, someone who tried to and was successful, went out and had a
Nashville.
different
Yeah.
career, and still kind of got the bug to come back and do the pop punk thing. There was something special about the community. That's absolutely just a fact, and the music just inspires. And so that's why I'm back here. All of a sudden, kids were talking about emo and pop punk on the internet again, and it's like, well, let the old man come tell you what it was really like, back in the day.
I love it. Love it.
Are you So you're in LA, the band's working for these reunion shows. Are you getting an opportunity to see what's going on, like in West Palm or Orlando, in terms of up and coming bands? Obviously, we know so many of the bands that we loved are back or coming around again. But when you guys go back for these reunion shows, you're going to get an opportunity for some of these like younger kids to step up. Are you interacting with that in any way?
It's a really good thing. I think I am, just through what I'm listening to. I don't have any Florida bands with the young kids, but there's a bunch of great, you know, young bands. I was just listening to this. Like, I mean, again, getting into heavier stuff like the Australian band Bloom that's been opening for Silverstein. Again, another like newer band. There's a hardcore band out of the Carolinas called Excide that I've been just like obsessed with. These guitars sound amazing. True North is a band from LA that's like a younger group of guys that's kind of making stuff that's kind of Seosin-esque. So there's some really cool, like, next generation that's, doing stuff. But we're so excited. There's this band called 5 Cent Wish that's playing some of our reunion shows. We're also playing with a band from New Jersey called North Vale. There's a connection between New Jersey and Florida. The Snowbirds come down, but also all of the bands from New Jersey come down. So if you think about, the Taking Back Sundays, and like the whole New Jersey scene was another pocket. And there's this connection between the New Jersey, New York scene, the Baysides, and that whole crew. They would start their tours in West Palm or South Florida and work their way back up the East Coast. That's how we all kind of got to enmesh with each other, is this kind of East Coast band connection. And so similar story, this band from New Jersey called North Vale is playing some shows with us on April 17th and 18th in West Palm and Orlando. And then one of our favorite bands from the local scene was this band called 5 Cent Wish. And they're coming back together and haven't played shows in a really long time. They were a bit older than us, and you know that kind of thing when you're looking up to those kids in school that you're like, they are the freaking coolest kids and the coolest band. That's how we feel about them, and couldn't be more excited to play these shows with them getting back together as well. So, yeah, hopefully a few of the younger bands that I mentioned are some really cool bands from the next generation that are coming up. But Respectable Street and Clematis Street in downtown West Palm, booked solid with great rock gigs. Seemingly every night of the week. Will's Pub, the other bar that we're playing in Orlando, is packed solid with really great rock shows. I think A Day to Remember, I can't remember, they shot something there. There's some historical connection between Will's Pub and their kind of trajectory upwards there. So it's just an iconic Orlando venue. But packed out events every night. Even Chris from Dashboard is doing these emo nights and his world down there in Florida, and he is DJing this bar called The Library in Orlando, where our singer JB used to bartend in college. And so that's when it came, like, we played gigs there, kind of college age at this, and now he's hosting these emo reunion nights with a target audience of college students, right, that are just as into this stuff as we are. So it's cool to see that it's so pervasive in culture, and younger generation and older generation all kind of getting together and enjoying rock music again.
Yeah, and the internet, TikTok, Instagram kind of stuff really like blows my mind with that, because yeah, you'll see someone um looking like they just came out of a Hot Topic or a PacSun or whatever, and it's like a 20-year-old guy, 20-year-old girl or whatever, and I'm in my head I'm going like, oh, they're listening to mom and dad's music. That kind of hurts, but like, it's good to see, because I think, like you mentioned it, the electronic music, and no shade to the electronic music, but like there is just something raw about the guitar and the drums and the garage band aesthetic. We mentioned you guys are revisiting songs from when you were like younger, um, and just the different feelings. Everything feels heightened at that time. And so I love to see it back, because I mean, like we said, I don't always know if kids have healthy outlets. So I'm like, okay, man, go bang a drum. Like you'll feel better about life after that. I kind of jokingly always have a segment that I call Hot Topics, because you gotta have an emo podcast, you gotta call something Hot Topics.
Love it.
And I think we have a shared lived experience here of I had a run with a band, and we toured and we played shows, and then all the social media and all the music stuff that existed back then got wiped and destroyed. And so there's like, I always joke, there's not a lot of evidence of my time in the music scene. It sounds like you guys experienced some of that too. Did you have a big MySpace presence? How much of Goodnight Moon's history do you think is just lost to a MySpace data corruption, whatever it was, 10, 15 years ago?
It's so true. It's so true. We looked back and like, we've had to rebuild an online presence ever since then. And it's really interesting. I mean, we had a decent number of MySpace followers back in the day, and all the music that was there. I loved Pure Volume as a music discovery platform. I just thought that site was beautifully laid out, and the way that they presented artists, and the way that you could listen to music. Those what, you have 2 or 3 songs for free, then you go out and buy the records. Buying records, that's a crazy concept. Again, kudos to Smart Punk for keeping that alive and people buying vinyl. But I mean, we've they joke that don't put anything on the internet because it'll go away. Well, if the company like MySpace erases all of their content, you're in luck, and all your online content gets wiped. But yeah, it's wild to see that everything that is on the internet doesn't last forever, and you've got to kind of rebuild it from scratch. So yeah, we miss it. I wish I knew who was in our top 8. It's probably the bands that we grew up playing with. So maybe 5 Cent Wish and Aniston and this band Never Surrender. I bet some of those groups are probably in our top 8. So yeah,
we were ranking our friends. That was brutal. That was
yeah, that's probably rough.
Yeah, but I think for the message boards with like Absolute Punk and Pure Volume, obviously MySpace. We cultivated a lot on MySpace. I booked an entire tour on MySpace. Like we weren't doing phone calls, we weren't doing grinds, anything like that. It was, I'm just gonna be in guys' DMs and whatever. And I know at that time it felt like it was such opportunity, because the music industry got smaller and you could connect with these places. Before I go on, I do want to just note, because you mentioned buying physical vinyl. I just processed this. You guys have a show on Record Store Day, so you could go buy records on April 18th, and then you could go see go see Goodnight Moon. So now, as you guys are reconnecting, doing music again, revisiting this old music, are you feeling like with the TikTok and the Instagram? Because that for me was a big thing. I saw sort of some MySpace similarities in the way the music scene's coming up right now through like TikTok, and the ability to connect with bands, the ability to hear new music. Like I said, for a guy who loved music so much and felt like he didn't get any new music for a long time, now I'm inundated with, I couldn't possibly listen to the number of bands that catch my eye on on TikTok and whatever. And so I do feel like as we're doing this resurgence, TikTok has sort of become that kind of MySpace kind of scene. Are you guys able to work with that a little bit, or maybe just find old old friends and things like that, and do it all over again? What's your experience been like joining the new social media scene?
Yeah, it's wild. We've got a lot to learn, and kudos to folks like you who are really good at it and are really on top of it. It's been really fun. I think, rebuilding the followings, and there's folks who were so stoked to see us come back, and that's, part of the reason why we did this is to kind of give some of those folks that we grew up with that came to all those shows, the music that they haven't heard in 20 years either. And so it's been fun to kind of connect with those folks. It's a tricky thing for people in their mid 30s to do the whole TikTok thing. And so we've tried to find a balance with it. Like, you'll see that we're doing like lyric videos and those sorts of things where we're kind of putting out digital content instead of dancing in front of a camera. It's
You don't want to be
it doesn't it
you don't want to be the face guys on the kids dancing app. You don't want to.
yeah, it's a little tricky, right? Dancing in front of the camera, and then that shows up in your in your meeting at work the next Monday isn't always the best thing. And we're not the best dancers either. My wife will tell you that I don't think you want to see me dancing on TikTok either. So no, it's cool to see the evolution of the platforms, and that there's great ways to have music discovery and all of that. We're doing our best, and so you'll see kind of hopefully we'll get some really cool footage from these shows, and we can kind of clip some stuff up and put that out as some content. But being a content creator, again, kudos to you and your network for doing all the stuff that you guys are doing, because it's a lot of work, and we're learning that pretty quickly.
My daughter, she's 6, almost 7, and she loves to tell other parents that daddy makes TikTok videos. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be a 10-minute conversation to give you some context on what's happening before you think that I'm a complete creep. So it's a balance, man. Like I said, when I came back into it, there were some younger people, like late teenagers, who were telling me, once again, this is going back like 4 or 5 years. They were telling me about kids talking about emo on the internet, on TikTok, essentially. And what they were describing didn't sound like the post-hardcore emo guys. Didn't even sound like the mall, we call it mallcore, mall goth. Didn't sound like those guys. It sounded like e-girls and like furries and stuff like that. Which, hey man, whatever you want to do. But I'm like, but that's not emo. That's not the scene I came up in. So, like you said, I'm going to work and I'm like, oh yeah, I was an emo kid. And I'm like, oh, you guys think I was that? No, hold on. We gotta fix that. And so that's how I got into it, that old man yelling at clouds kind of thing. But it has been like a very rich field to, like I said, revisit all this stuff, and for bands to come back out of the woodwork to speak to your guys' story. That's kind of the same thing. You had a scene, you had to leave the scene and go get real lives, but through this reemergence, you can recapture some of that and revisit it, which I think is very, very cool. You guys all went out and had your own lives. Have you been working like in the music industry? Did you keep any of this? Did you play in other bands in the meantime? What did the hiatus period look like for you personally?
Yeah, It's a wild story. You talked about, Cassidy Pope and the kind of the connection between Nashville and this scene, which is its own kind of story that would be really fun for somebody to tell on another episode of the podcast. Is Nashville's role.
The
Um,
alternative, baby. The alternative. Yeah.
the alternative. It's great. I mean, like, Aaron Gillespie's producing country records now, right? You got like all of this really cool connection between the scenes. So I went to college in Nashville, moved to Nashville for a while, worked on some records there, across genres, and worked in studios, and it was a really awesome experience for me. And then I pivoted my career away from day to day in the studio, and I worked in the audio technology business, which is where I've been. So I've always maintained a home studio. I have a studio space with some other musicians here in LA that I share, for with drums and tracking and microphones and all of that fun stuff. And have always been in like the sales and marketing side of audio
Mhm.
technology. And so I've been one step adjacent to the music tech world, and again, still kind of working on and producing music in my spare time throughout that period of time. But all the members of the band have gone off and done different things. Zach Mativio, one of our guitar players, has done a similar thing. He's kind of in the audio tech space and has gigged. He lived in Texas for a while, talking about a country connection, and played in that scene for a little bit. But yeah, it's I've done my best to kind of weave, my professional world and my personal world together. And it's funny with all of this coming back. A close colleague of mine grew up in the UK and in the scene during that era, and he's like, "Oh man, I opened up for this band called Bayside in like 2007." I was like, "Bro, this is crazy. Like your band was opening for the UK leg. We were opening for the Florida shows and a few, the West Palm dates, and so it's just kind of a funny connection that we're all kind of coming out of the woodwork." And I was with a colleague last week who is a huge Day to Remember fan and is a singer, songwriter himself, and so you just kind of like we're like folks like yourself, we're kind of coming out of the woodwork, and you look into the corporate world, and you're like, all right, there's more of us than we thought that there were. So it's been fun to kind of see that.
You spent time as a musician back in the day. You've stayed, next to the scene. Now you're jumping back into the scene as Goodnight Moon comes back. So I just want to ask some questions. Get your little flavor of your personal pocket of being in a band in the music industry. And the first one is, since you guys left and came back, and I think I know the answer to this, but if you had to pick what is better for bands, what meant more for bands, MySpace or TikTok?
Yeah, I mean MySpace, right? We're OGs, so yeah. Tom, bring it back, man.
Bring it
Um,
back.
love your photography career, but bring it back.
Yeah, you had to get the formatting just right. You had to get all the coding just right, and then you put your song on there, and it was great. I like to challenge my geographical bands that are really tied to a local area, to pick a favorite. So this might be difficult, but better Florida band, A Day to Remember or Newfound Glory?
Wow, that's a hard one. I'm
I
gonna
know.
go OG and go Newfound Glory.
Newfound Glory, yeah. The you mentioned getting into the heavier stuff. Newfound Glory was like a sneaky introduction to both emo and then hardcore for me. I knew that they always called themselves easycore, but it wasn't until I started playing some of their like guitar riffs and learning some of the history of their band and who they were playing with, and I felt like, yeah, that just slid in. So then when A Day to Remember came out, those two bands just kind of back to back really establish um a journey from pop punk into pop punk with the elements of hardcore and things like that. So those are both good bands for people looking for both of those things. This is once again taking you back to your old days in West Palm, but when you're playing shows in Florida, going up and down that coast, like you said, where was the best place to eat after a show in Florida?
Oh, this is easy. I miss it very much. There's a fast food place called Pollo Tropical that's throughout Florida. I don't know if you've eaten at one before, but
No.
it's a very quintessential Florida chain of Cuban food. And
Okay.
they do these bowls with like black beans, rice, sweet plantains, and it's very like, accessible off the side of the road, fast food, but it's like high quality Cuban food. Every time I go back to Florida, I go to a Pollo Tropical, and it's just great. It's very quintessentially South Florida, like Cuban culture food. So yeah, that's great tour food.
That's awesome. That's a unique one. We're not getting Waffle House. We're going for, would you say Pollo Tropical? Is that?
Pollo Tropical is so Floridian, but I do love Waffle House too. I mean, Waffle House at 2 in the morning, nothing beats it.
So we said you guys are coming back after our 20 years. You're going to play some shows. You got the new music. Is there a band, maybe a band that you played with in Florida, or a band that you've discovered in the meantime from 20 years ago? I think of like these. We're doing the Warp Tour reveals right now. We're doing the When We Were Young Fest when that's around, and it feels like we got a lot of our toys back, like almost all of them. Is there a band from back in the day that broke up or left or just hasn't been around that if you could bring one back, which one would it be?
Oh, man, really interesting question. Well, I think we're gonna do it with 5 Cent Wish, and so this is our wish is to bring 5 Cent Wish back, and they're gonna play with us in West Palm and Orlando, and so they haven't re-recorded a new record yet, so hope that they join us in that journey and do that as well. But we're so excited to see them live for the first time in 20 years, and so yeah, stoked for everybody to check them out.
Cool. 5 Cent Wish. Do you know, hey, since you're plugging them and plugging, do they still have music on the internet? Can we find them?
I think you can. It's on like Amazon. I think it's like on Amazon Music or something there, but it's not widely distributed or readily available. So it's for your crate diggers. It's for your folks that really want to get into the deep depths of the scene. So yeah.
We love a good deep cut. All right. Rob, I have greatly enjoyed all of this. Thank you for your candidness. Thank you for your love for the scene. Thank you for that you guys are coming back. My last question is simply this. If people want to know about Goodnight Moon, they want to hear your music, they want to see you live, follow you on social media, any of that, where do we go to find out more about Goodnight Moon?
Yeah, goodnightmoon.band is our website, and from there you can get to Spotify and Instagram and all of the other links. So, yeah, goodnightmoon.band. Thanks so much for the opportunity and for your interest in the scene and all you're doing for all the bands. So, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
No, I'm excited to see what you guys come up with for the shows, and I'm excited to see what happens next. Is maybe there is that 2.0 that we'll all be watching out for. This has been the Never a Phase podcast. Thank you, Rob, for being here. Everyone, go check out Goodnight Moon.
Awesome. Cheers.
This show is a part of the Never a Phase Network, a collective of creators dedicated to keeping the spirit of the scene alive. Our network of creators make social media content, they share music news and reviews, and of course bring you great podcast content. For more information, please visit neveraphasenetwork.com and follow Never a Phase Network on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.